Hello, my name's Florence. Welcome to the theobspod. I'm an NHS obstetrician, hoping to share some thoughts and experiences about my working life. Perhaps you enjoy Call the Midwife, maybe birth fascinates you, or you're simply curious about what exactly an obstetrician is. You might be pregnant and preparing for birth. Perhaps you work in maternity and want to know what makes your obstetric colleagues tick, or you want some fresh ideas and inspiration. Whichever of these is the case, and for that matter anyone else that's interested, the theobspod is for you. Episode 68, Good Samaritan. Today I'm going to focus on our role as health professionals outside our work. Being a qualified doctor, nurse, midwife, or other healthcare professional comes with a certain degree of responsibility. You've got to face the fact that you've got training, knowledge, and skills that may enable you to help someone far beyond the general public. There's an expectation that you will do so, but equally this has to be balanced with being outside your place of work. It's rarely convenient, and you often have other things and other commitments. GMC, Good Medical Practice, states in paragraph 26, you must offer help if emergencies arise in clinical settings or in the community, taking account of your own safety, your competence, and the availability of other options for care. It's pretty clear. You need to help. And most doctors would not disagree with this. After all, a lot of us went into medicine to help people. But it's rarely as straightforward as that. Just after I qualified as a doctor in 1995, I remember there being an incredible account of two doctors developing an improvised chest drain during a transatlantic flight. They used some implements from the first aid kit, cutlery, and a coat hanger. At the time, I was slightly daunted. How can one ever follow that? Did this set expectations unrealistically high for what one can achieve? And what if things don't go well? You don't rise to the occasion. You're not a hero. You end up trying to do your best, but actually end up doing harm. Harm. It's not the first thing that crosses my mind, but it is the one in the aftermath of stopping and helping that can stop me sleeping. Replaying the events in my mind, worrying that actually I should have taken a different course of action and that in the heat of the moment I did something wrong. Of course, being an obstetrician, litigation does lurk at the back of my mind too. What if someone sues me because I should have known better? And many of us pay indemnity fees, mainly for this purpose. Our work as NHS doctors is covered by the NHS Litigation Authority, after all, covering most of our working life, or for me, all of it. So I pay money to the Medical Defence Union, an insurance scheme, so that I'm covered for all eventualities. And what about if you're out with your children and they're in your sole charge? And what about if the emergencies that are happening in front of you is way beyond your expertise? During my career, I've stopped for a number of things, some serious, some not. And as one of these was on my recent holiday, it prompted me to think, that would be an interesting episode. So I'm hoping to give you a little bit of an insight here. Most of the time I'm in London. I live there. It's very densely populated and very busy. Often when I stop in London, there turn out to be far more suitably qualified people at hand, and I can, with a clear conscience, walk away. One of the first things when you declare yourself is working out the unspoken pecking order. I've taken to introducing myself as, "Hello, I'm Florence. I'm a doctor, although I am an obstetrician. Do you need any help?" I can feel a bit apologetic, embarrassed. Yeah, I am a doctor. But I feel the need to manage expectations. Let's face it, in my whole career, I've never had to stop for an obstetric or maternity emergency. That would be fab. I would be in my element. I would absolutely be the expert. I would know what to do. But the last time I dealt with, let's say, a heart attack was over 25 years ago as a house officer. Not really up to date. Often the stops are trivial. Someone's fainted. Someone's drunk and passed out. My family have become accustomed to it. Here we go again. Someone's lying on the ground. Is mum going to get involved? Chances are in London, there turns out to be a GP, a cardiologist, an A&E nurse. Frequently someone I feel is far better qualified than I am. I can stop an offer, make sure people are okay, and walk on. Some instances, though, are more complicated. A captive audience. What's it like that moment you're quietly minding your own business, perhaps on a train or a plane, and a voice comes over the tannoy? Is there a doctor on board? There's a split second of hesitation. One time this happened to me. We were on a very crowded tube train on the way back from a football match. There was a delay in the station. The train wasn't moving. None of us knew why. Then the request came. Is there a doctor on the train? I stood with my kids thinking, what shall I do? It was only a brief pause. But it was long enough to hear one of my kids pipe up, "Mummy, you're a doctor," loudly in front of the whole crowd. Bit awkward, to say the least. So I got out of the carriage and approached the station staff, who took me along to a collapsed man a few carriages away. There were two of us, myself and another medic. I think he was a cardiologist. Very sadly, the man had arrested, and we did CPR valiantly on the floor of the tube train. I asked for equipment. Surprisingly, there was no defibrillator or any other equipment at the station. And that's one of the key points about stopping as a Good Samaritan. You're well beyond your comfort zone. Most of us work in hospitals or surgeries, well equipped. All the stuff we need at our fingertips all the time. No equipment can make you feel very useless. You've got the skills, but you can't really use them. It's quite frustrating. I think the situation was actually hopeless. I had no idea how long he'd been down. But one of the things that annoyed me most was when the ambulance team arrived, they literally elbowed us out of the way. They weren't interested in any handover. They weren't interested in who we are or what skills we had or what treatment we'd tried to give. They weren't interested in the fact we'd actually been asked to help by station staff. I was bundled out of the carriage, allowed to rejoin my family, who were patiently waiting on the platform, the whole station having been emptied by now, and was left to make my way home with the resuscitation and basic life support swirling in my head. Sadly, I know that man died. I saw an obituary in the football programme the following week. If it hadn't been for that, I would never have known. And that's one of the other key things about helping out. You don't know what happens next. You don't know if you did a good job or a bad job. You don't know what the outcome was. But it stays with you. The memories of what happened and your attempts to try and help. I've only once had to help out on a plane journey. Once I married and changed my passport to Mrs. S, I quite liked the fact that I was a little incognito. No longer Dr. W when travelling. As it were, my card was no longer marked. But once on a long-haul flight, the call did come. Could any doctors please identify themselves to cabin crew? I dutifully did, as did a nurse. The two of us were taken to a woman who was feeling very unwell. She was very faint and vomiting excessively. She'd got onto the plane not feeling brilliant. Probably she had some sort of gastric bug. This whole situation was very weird. I discovered that on the plane they have quite a lot of medical equipment. First aid, basic medical drugs, drips. So initially I thought, fantastic. They've asked for my help. They actually have some useful stuff I could use. I could make a difference. But then I discovered everything had to be run through a medical team on the ground. To some extent, I can see the point. I mean, I literally could be anyone. Just because I said I'm a doctor doesn't mean I am. However, we ended up in a really stupid situation. All the communication had to go through the cockpit. And obviously since 9/11, no one is allowed in the cockpit, apart from the staff. So the treatment ended up being excessively slow. Everything we said had to be relayed to the cockpit. The cockpit then relayed that to the medical team on the ground. The medical team on the ground then gave the cockpit instructions, and then the cabin crew relayed the information back to us. I just felt the woman needed some injections of anti-sickness medication and an intravenous drip of fluid. She was very dehydrated. Their priorities were obviously different. Number 1, do we need to land the plane? Fair question. Number 2, if we continue on our journey, when we land, do we need an ambulance ready? Finally, 3, please can you give this treatment as the cabin crew are untrained? So finally, after a long time, we were sanctioned for the nurse to give 1 intramuscular injection of anti-sickness medication. So having asked, is there a doctor on board? They didn't really want my advice, my opinion, my help, my expertise. In the end, I felt I literally did nothing except talk kindly and reassure the woman who was unwell and chat to the nurse who was along with me, who felt equally as frustrated as I did. It's quite trivial, I know, but I was actually really annoyed to have missed the end of the film I was watching and to have spent much of a long-haul flight crouched uncomfortably on the floor rather than in my seat, just for me to have my hands tied completely as to what I was actually allowed to do. My attitude softened slightly a few weeks later when I got a thank you letter from the airline with a gift of some air miles. But quickly I realised that they weren't actually enough to actually travel anywhere at all. So a thank you letter with nothing would actually have been better than the thank you letter with a promise of something that then turned out to be nothing. More recently, I've had to stop at a few accidents. I was driving to work one day and saw a cyclist on the ground who'd come off. He was a bit dazed and in quite a lot of pain, and I was immediately very sympathetic, not only because I'm a doctor, but because my husband has had a number of serious cycling accidents, and I've been appalled by the fact that people didn't stop. Okay, I appreciate a fracture is not always obvious, but at least one of the times he had blood streaming down his face from a number of cuts, so he was visibly hurt. So I jumped out of the car ready to rectify that. Hi, my name's Florence. I'm a doctor. I work at the hospital. Would you like me to take you? Once he answered in the affirmative, I scooped him up into the car, bunged his bike in the back, and off we went to A&E. I was late for work, but I gave myself quite a pat on the back. After all, I'd done a really good thing, hadn't I? At lunchtime, I popped over to A&E to check his progress, see how he was doing, and was somewhat embarrassed to find him strapped to a spinal board with a neck collar on, waiting for the results of his cervical spine x-ray. Whoops. Maybe I should have called an ambulance. Maybe, in my enthusiasm, I did the wrong thing. That brings me to my most recent adventure. I was on holiday. There was a traffic jam. On reaching the front of the queue of traffic, I found a motorcyclist on the ground, surrounded by a few people. I didn't even think. I was driving, and my husband said, before I knew it, you'd stopped and leapt out of the car without even talking to me. That's true. I leapt out. I'm a doctor. Do you need help? But I am just an obstetrician. He was in a lot of pain and having difficulty breathing. It wasn't London. It was rural. But lo and behold, it turned out that the other people that had stopped, one introduced herself as a midwife and the other as just an HCA, healthcare assistant. I said to her, "You're never just an HCA." We formed a little team and muddled on through. In fact, it was the HCA that reminded us that we really should all introduce ourselves. And the HCA, who when I was taking his pulse said, "How about a respiratory rate?" So we took his pulse, his respiratory rate, keeping a note over time, but mainly trying to keep him calm. I could see he was well perfused. He had a good pulse. He was pink. So I could tell he wasn't in imminent danger. It did feel like a scarily long time before first the police and then help arrived. But our little MDT worked well together. I was able to reassure the man and tell him, "Your pulse is lovely and steady, your breathing's good, I know you're feeling like you're struggling to breathe, but your lips are pink and that tells me you've got really good oxygen levels and you're doing fine and help is on its way." When the cavalry came, excitingly it was in the form of the Welsh Air Ambulance, and for the first time ever in my experiences as a Good Samaritan, they actually listened carefully to what we said and then proceeded to use our skills. They found that our pulse and respiratory rate and observations were helpful. We helped as they tried to site an intravenous line and give him pain relief. We helped, under their instruction, move him into a safe, flat position. And we helped as they moved him onto the spinal board. They made us feel valuable. They made us feel we'd done some good. They made us feel useful. It's a tiny little thing, I know, but it mattered. Okay, we hadn't done any major medical treatment, but the three of us, we had sat, helped, reassured, worked together as a team for an hour and a half. He was airlifted to Cardiff. In the aftermath, I worried. They were querying a spinal injury. I was worried, had we moved him too much? While we were waiting, had we kept him still enough? He was uncomfortable and restless. It was difficult. It was a challenge. It took some time for the adrenaline to calm down and for me to be able to think and reflect. And that's the other thing. It's very difficult because you might never know the outcome. You don't know if you did the right things or the wrong things. Which brings me to the zesty bit. I think if you're a professional, believe in yourself. As I reflect on all these experiences, I actually think the main thing I contributed, in fact, was not my medical expertise at all, but my bedside manner. Being at ease, talking to someone, reassuring them in a confident way, them trusting that I might know what I was talking about. I think that counts for quite a lot. Maybe I need to be more confident and say, hello, my name is Florence, I'm a doctor. And not the caveat, not the obstetrician bit. Maybe that's what's most important. Yes, ABC, keeping someone, airway, breathing, life-saving support. But actually, if someone's conscious and injured, maybe it's more about that reassurance. You are okay. If you're not a healthcare professional and you're someone in need of help, realise that that person may feel uncomfortable and under pressure. They don't have the bells and whistles they normally have. And be tolerant if they make mistakes. And if you don't have medical expertise and you stop and help, know that holding someone's hand and talking to them and reassuring is pretty much most of what we're going to be doing. And you can do that too. If you're a paramedic, ambulance service, arriving at the scene, a little courtesy goes a long way. Thanking those bystanders who've stepped in, listening to the information they're telling you, and making them feel that they've done a good job as far as they could. It helps give them closure. Because for me, what happens is I go away and think about it, try and make sense of how I helped, mistakes I did or didn't make. They tend to replay over and again in my head. And the fact that the Welsh Air Ambulance just took that moment to actually consider what we'd done and involve us in the ongoing treatment rather than just pushing us out of the way really helped me and made me feel that I'd contributed something. That's it for today, but I would like to give a shout out to Sarah, the midwife sonographer from Gwent, Sam, the HCA, I'm not sure where from, Pete, the air ambulance consultant, and Robin, the air ambulance trainee. That team, on that day, I think we did a good job. We did the best we could. And I'm proud that in some small way, I played my part, even if I am just an obstetrician. Hello, my name's Florence. Welcome to the theobspod. I'm an NHS obstetrician, hoping to share some thoughts and experiences about my working life. Perhaps you enjoy Call the Midwife, maybe birth fascinates you, or you're simply curious about what exactly an obstetrician is. You might be pregnant and preparing for birth. Perhaps you work in maternity and want to know what makes your obstetric colleagues tick, or you want some fresh ideas and inspiration. Whichever of these is the case, and for that matter anyone else that's interested, the theobspod is for you.